How you feeling, House? We all good?
Yeah, I'm on that. I just started keto this week.
Uh-oh.
I had to, man. My weight's creeping up, and I'm like, I gotta do something. So I think I started it Monday, so I'm just in it. But I can already tell. I don't think I'm getting enough calories from fat. I mean, I've kind of knocked out the carbs, the protein's there, but I just gotta. So I think I'm trying to do intermittent fasting with it too. I'm trying to just spark the whole thing. But I know
Yeah.
it seemed like, and it's funny because now I got to bring up Mark, and Mark would have those weird friggin' shakes he'd make in the morning with bone broth and creamer and
Yeah.
butter and stuff. I may have to do something like that just for the fat calories I need to get. I think the other stuff I'll be okay with. I mean, because man, I like I'll eat a bag of pretzels. I like pizza. But I can manage that, and then I've just got to tighten up my window of intermittent fasting. So I go to bed a little later than I used to when I worked for the Panthers. So I'm up to 10:30 now, and I'm trying to keep my window 12 to 6, possibly even 7. But about 8 or 9, we're watching Netflix, man. I'm like, that's about when I go get my bag of pretzels or something like that. So I got to shut that down. But I could already tell from what I can gather, from what I've read and what everybody's kind of told me, I would say after 2 days, I got to just look at it, investing more time and figuring out ways to get more of the fat grams in me. And because I'm on vacation now and there's no gyms open, I can reduce some of my training volumes while I'm on this weight cut. But as soon as I can get to where I want to get, I'll figure out the proper ways to transition off, because I don't mind doing some of the vertical diet stuff because it's easy for me to cook. I can cook rice. I can throw a bunch of meat in a wok, stir that stuff up, put some vegetables in and some hot sauce, and I would prefer to eat with a spoon.
Yeah. I would recommend bacon to start
I know
bone up on that.
my wife just cooked a bunch of bacon. I hate bacon, but I guess I'm gonna have
Oh,
to.
really? Oh, shit.
Yeah,
You're
I'm not a bacon
you're
guy.
one of the 4 people that don't like bacon.
Yeah, I mean, but she's the way she cooked it. I think I could probably get away with the way she's cooked it. I might be able to eat it. But yeah, I was like, damn, my kids love bacon. My grandkids love bacon. Me, I'm not so much.
It's weird. Well, that's all right.
But I mean, I had to do something just because my activity, my training is still solid, but because my day's different, my activity level throughout the day is different.
Yeah.
Nothing I've done out of the ordinary. It is just creeped up a little bit to points where I didn't think I'd see again. Now it's okay, everybody's told my son. Now my oldest son's done keto several times and he's killed it. And then I know some of you guys, I think that work for Mark know Big John Heck, big strong man out of North Carolina. So John, he's done keto several times, and he's given me some pointers. And then my buddy Steve Hartman, who works out of Kentucky, he's a big nutrition guy, and he's given them. Me and you've talked a lot about it, like when Mark was on it and what it looks like. So, a lot of this, like I said, my biggest problem is not the protein and the fact that you got to eat green vegetables like spinach, cucumber, stuff like that. Is getting the excess amount of fat that I have for it to really work. But if anything, I'm definitely in a caloric deficit. So, and I'm today I did conditioning. I did a little Mike Robertson special. I did 5-minute rounds of 16-inch step ups with a weight vest, and then had a 65% recovery for my heart rate in between each set. So I'll go for a walk later on today. Tomorrow I'll just bring a bunch of kettlebells and center mass bells in the back of my truck and train in the parking deck of the condo unit to where we stay. So I think now, because of where I'm training the next couple of weeks, and then I go to Wisconsin for a week, this will be a good deal. My volume of training will be down, and I'm cleaning up some injuries. And then from there, I will pick it up when I get back.
Right on, man. Well, we're starting to get a couple people in here, and they'll kind of trickle in as we go. But Joe, just want to say thank you for jumping on with us. You know, I'm a huge fan. Everybody at Mark Bell's is a huge fan. Everybody Slingshot is a huge fan. You know, for anyone who's listening or on the video here, Joe is one of the godfathers in the strength and conditioning world, in my opinion. Anyone who's anyone can pretty much trace their lineage to about 3 or 4 people, and Joe is one of those 3 or 4 people. And, you know, anytime it's I consider him a mentor, and it's always a pleasure to get to talk to him. He's a, you know, unbelievably knowledgeable person. And something that I think is the most impressive about you, Coach House, is kind of the white belt mentality that you've always had, that you're always learning. I remember one of the first things that I really attracted me to you as a coach was you're doing an interview with Dave Tate, and this has to be 20 some odd years ago at this point. And Dave wanted to start to talk about training, and you said, hold on, you know, you talked about training. You said, Dave, you do realize that, you know, this whole thing, you know, has a whole bunch of layers to it. And you started talking about psychology. You started talking about motivation. You started talking about how to mold these men, you know, these kids into men, and then start to try and get them into kind of the next phase of their life. So you weren't just thinking about one thing. You're thinking about a collective whole of a human being and an athlete. And then you went on to talk about all the books that you had behind you, and none of them are training books. There's a bunch of psychology stuff, a bunch of, you know, sociology stuff and everything else. And it was, it really opened up my eyes, you know, being someone who had those degrees and not necessarily an ex-phys degree, to start to understand that there is so much more than just, you know, X's and O's that are on a sheet of paper, a program that someone sent you. So, you know, it's always an honor to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. And let's have you just talk about how you got started on your journey to become the strength coach that you are.
I appreciate it, Jesse. And yeah, for you and everybody at markbell.com, I appreciate you guys thinking about me and having me on today. And to the listeners, I hope I don't bore you. Hope we can get some embracing and stimulate some thought and give you some things to think about, as well as your own training and hopefully even in life in general. But my first thing I would say is, like anybody else, most people get attracted to iron because of somebody else, right? Like, you don't really know what lifting weights means until you see somebody else lifting weights. And I was fortunate that my dad was into it a little bit, not as crazy as my high school coach, but him and my high school coach had played together. And my high school coach, and at the same high school that I wound up playing at. And my dad had a full basement. We had a full basement of weights. Like, we had the old standard York plates. Like, till this day, like now that I'm kind of a weight room historian, we had standard gold plated or gold colored 50-pound York stamped barbell plates at our house. And I'm like, God, whatever happened to those? I would love to have those in my gym right now. And
hell yeah,
cool stuff we had. We had, you know, an old standing incline board. We had a makeshift, I didn't even know it was called a Smith machine at the time. We had a makeshift Smith machine made out of PVC pipe that we had 2 huge sewer caps that were the weights for it. I mean, there was just like stuff we had in the gym. And so my first real venture of lifting weights was probably before 13, probably 10 or 11. We just dibby-dally in my dad or my basement with 2 friends of mine, the DiNapoli brothers, Mike and Dom, who were a little bit older than me. Dom was 1 year, Mike was 2, and they were the ones who convinced my dad to let me start playing organized football earlier than my dad had wanted me to, but I was bigger than most. But I would say that the true point of the lifting career, so to speak, happened probably when I was in 7th or 8th grade, and my dad would start taking me up to the high school on Saturday mornings to watch a guy named Pete Antonelli train. Pete was one of the first bigger recruits that I can remember that was coming out of my high school. He wound up going to Maryland, but our high school coach would open up the gym on Saturdays just so Pete could work out with him by himself. And because my dad knew Pete watching him play and obviously the relationship with my high school coach, I was able to watch them a lot. And that really was like, okay, this is more so. I think it was my dad showing me, you want to be a good football player? If you want to get out of Inwood, I mean, because back then the only way I was getting out of my hometown was a football scholarship or I was going to work sanitation with my dad. So it was either it was all in or all out, and nothing against the sanitation, man. It's a big time job with hell of a benefits, and my dad wound up working there over 30 years and being a superintendent and all that. But that wasn't something I necessarily wanted to do, and I think he didn't want me to do. You know, like anybody else, you're always trying to figure out ways to blossom your children outside of what you've accomplished. So I watched that like wholeheartedly and understood. So soon as it became time for me to really figure out what it meant, I was in 8th grade going into 9th grade, and we started to pick up the tempo a little bit. But in my high school, high school didn't start till 10th grade. So 9th grade was actually in the junior high. And during that time, one of my other dad's jobs outside of the sanitation was he drove the school bus in the afternoon so he can keep an eye on me. And then, he was like ranked one of the number one bouncers on Long Island when he was when I was growing up. So he had 3 different jobs to make sure that I could do and my sister could do what we wanted. So I would jump on the junior high bus after school because his route actually went right by the high school. So he would drop me off at the high school so I could go lift, and then he'd come by and pick me up at the end. So that's kind of how the organization started. And my high school coach in the 80s, we were way above the norm in organized strength training. Like it was, if you don't lift weights, you don't play varsity. And in my high school at that time in the early 80s, if you played varsity as a sophomore, you were like considered legit. And then if you started as a sophomore, you were like more than you earned major props from the seniors if you wound up starting as a sophomore. So I went up there as a immature, naive, very, I don't want to say scared, but maybe a little intimidated of walking in a weight room for the first time, and you see these guys who are seniors who have already been in the program for 3 years, and just general size wise, I wasn't much different than them, but just muscle. I was a young 9th grade. I started my first high school football game in 10th grade at 14 years old. I went to college. Shit. I was 17 years old as a redshirt freshman, the youngest guy on the team. So I was an October baby. So I was big for my age, but from a maturity level, I was still young for the class of school I was in. So I came in and absorbed the process. We had I would say our program, based off of what I know now, was a combination at the time of what the University of Maryland was putting together and what Penn State was doing. So Maryland, why Maryland? Because my high school coach's college head coach at Virginia Tech was now at Maryland. So obviously we're going to adapt a lot of that methodology. And I still don't know why Penn State. I kind of figured out Penn State later on, when I learned that most of our accessory work was one set to failure, and then we would bench and squat and deadlift for like our strength stuff. But again, it was organized. It was nothing's mandatory, but it was pretty mandatory. I mean, and my high school coach was extremely committed to it as a trade. The other thing that I was fortunate about was my dad was, I think, 3 years older, and my high school coach was 4 years older than Lyle Alzado. So Lyle Alzado is like the creme de la creme of football players that come out of our high school. So everybody, Lyle was the king. Like my era, you were a football player, you knew Lyle. Like I wore 77 in college because of Lyle Alzado. And fortunately, because my dad had a rapport with him when he did come back through the 5 towns in Inwood. I've actually got lucky enough to train in the same gym with him at the old Jackal Lane in Lawrence.
And, oh, wow.
got to learn and understand what it takes to be a professional athlete. And I think, if we're on markbell.com, I think we can spoke a little bit openly about, supplement utilization. And I know a lot of things that Lyles had come clean with at the end of his career, I think has cost him a Hall of Fame nod, because even though they didn't track sacks unofficially, he had 127 career sacks as an NFL defensive lineman, and he doesn't even get a look because he was willing to come out and say that his whole career he was on steroids, and he felt like steroids put him in the position to be the type of player he was. And I think there could be some merit in that, because obviously they're performance-enhancing drugs. But the thing, like we all know, if you ain't working hard and you ain't putting in the time, it don't matter how many steroids you're on. And for the way he worked, because when I first met him and really met him, he just got let go from the Browns and it just got signed by the Raiders. So he was in full-blown, I got to prove these fools wrong mode and show them I still got it. And he wound up being comeback player of the year that year, and then wound up winning a Super Bowl with the Raiders, which was the pinnacle for anybody in the NFL. So I was exposed to some things early that I understood that you still have to have talent. Like, if we're talking about lifting to be lifters, that's a totally different conversation that I would learn about later in my own competitive career. But at that point in time, lifting for athletics, no one really knew what that meant. I mean, you just knew that, hey, man, let's get stronger, and it could help you get faster, and it might not get you hurt as much. But now it's evolved into such a different types of a domain of what athletic day strength training means. Till back in the 80s, it was just like get in the weight room and lift weights. There was no progressions. I mean, I did the same program as the senior, didn't even know how to lift weights. It's like, here's the program, go jump in and go. That's no disrespect to my high school coach. That's the way it was done. I mean,
right.
Just like even when I first started as a strength coach in college, if it was 80% squat and that was 405 for you, there was no warm-ups. You walked in the room through 405 on the bar and started lifting. Now you would be considered, a poor coach to do something like that. So it's also an evolution of learning and stuff. And obviously, fortunately for me, that ability to work hard and learn those types of work ethics and being ingrained in strength training early on gave me the opportunity to enhance my skills enough where I was fortunate to get multiple scholarship offers. And like I tell people, I was fortunate enough. Now, I don't even with star system. I wouldn't even know where to rank myself in the star system. I just know that I put myself in a position where I got to choose where I went to school, if that makes sense, rather than I got one offer and it's either you go there or you don't go anywhere for free. Like, I had multiple choices to go to school, and my three final choices was Syracuse, South Carolina, and Wake Forest. And I'll be 100% honest with you. Knowing what I knew, the people who were in my corner, what I had available to me going forward, I chose Wake Forest because I was going to be a big fish in a little pond, if that makes sense. If I'd have went to Syracuse, I would have started at Syracuse possibly 2 years, maybe 3. If I went to South Carolina, maybe South Carolina was pretty good back then. It would have been a little tougher to break the lineup, but probably similar 2-year probably starter. But going to Wake, one, I was recruited heavily as an offensive lineman. Wake said that I could play defense, so that kind of helped them in the recruiting process. Plus, I knew right away I could start 4 years at Wake Forest. My whole thing was people thought, oh, man, you must have been pretty good in school, highly academic school. I had nothing to do with academics. It had to do with how fast could I start and get to the league. Just like any other player who has Division I aspirations, it's how do I get to the league? And I felt that was my best direction. Now, that whole got derailed. When I got in, I did really well in fall camp at a point where they were thinking about not redshirting me. And that was the only time my dad stepped in at any point in my career and said, they called him and told him, and they asked him what he thought. And he goes, absolutely not. The kid's 17 years old. I don't care how good he is for you. He's going to be playing against 23-year-old men, and he's not ready for it. And so they redshirted me, and during that time, I wound up by the next spring, I was about 285 and already one of the biggest and strongest guys on the team. And my whole plan got derailed the last week of spring ball when I had beaten out 3 upperclassmen and was told I would get the starting nose guard position. And on like the last 10 minutes of practice, I was in a pass rush situation. I'm going into probably, I don't know what it was. I hit the quarterback. I can't remember if it was a sack or not. That's irrelevant. The defensive end got blocked into me and I blew my knee out. So here I am sitting, all right, man, here's what you wanted, 4-year starter. It's go time. Let's go to the league. And within one play, in the 1980s, you didn't want to have any type of knee injury, let alone an ACL and MCL tear. And that's the last thing you wanted. And sure enough, that was my diagnosis. So that would happen on a Saturday night. By Sunday morning at 8:30, I have surgery. So I missed my whole next year. So I don't play football for an entire year, rehabbing. I'm working my butt off. Something's not right. I go through half a spring ball going into my sophomore year, and I'm like, guys that I was just dominating, couldn't get a push. My strength was okay, but just couldn't do the things you need to do on a football. And I'm like, something's wrong. And they didn't want to go in and scope it until a full year from the original surgery. And sure enough, I find like, you got to go in. There's just something is wrong. Like I'm crying my eyes out because I got these dudes that I was just smoking that are just making me look like some chump. And I wasn't going to go out like that. And sure enough, when they went in to do what they thought was going to be a scope, back then we had athletic training classes where we were allowed to watch. We were able to get access to watch surgeries. And one of my buddies, who's now the wide receiver coach at Louisville, was actually in the surgery, and he saw it where he's watching the surgery, and they're going through the scope, and they're cleaning out a bunch of stuff. And he goes, hey, what's that? And what had happened was, back then, they don't do it now, but they would staple the MCL together. Now they just let it scar down. And the type of staple they use, the best I can to describe it was like a tabletop. So it was a flat piece with 4 prongs. And one of those prongs had broken up. It had slid into my knee joint. So just think about like putting a pencil in a door hinge and you can't extend it or close it all the way. So for about 6 months, I was training, running, doing old school mat drills with this prong stuck in my joint. And everybody's trying to say, oh, he's not working hard enough in rehab, something's up. And my buddy said they pulled it out and it extended my knee like 10 degrees.
Oh, man.
So I don't know what's happening. I get up from the surgery. I start walking around thinking I just got scoped. And then they told me this and like, you're never going to believe what happened. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? I'm some friggin' statistic in a medical journal now? That doesn't help me in what I want to accomplish. So now the whole process is like, I'm sitting in a hospital bed, like, I'm not stupid, man. I know how it is, man. I'm like, man, ACL, MCL, what do I do now? It's like, now I got to go to school. I got to graduate. I'm not thinking about that stuff. I'm thinking about getting to the league. And again, I'm not, it's just my story. I mean, and so now it's like, okay, now you got to rehab. Now you got to come back. And so I rehab, So I haven't played in the game in 2 years since high school. I go into my sophomore year. I have 2 surgeries under my belt without a game played. I'm playing first game. I'm a backup. Second game, I'm a backup. Third game, I'm a backup. Fourth game, we go up to Army, and I'm from New York. So I've got like 50, 60 people up there. And the same coach who had told me that I was going to be starting that spring ball before I blew my knee out was a GA at the time. Now he's my position coach. And he says, hey, man, if you have a good game up here this week in Army, we're going to start you the next week. So what happens when I go up to Army on that terrible turf at Mikey Stadium? I blow the MCL out in my other knee. And now it's I never seen my dad cry much back then, crying his eyes. I'm consoling him because I'm in shock. So now a 4-year, my goal was to be a 4-year starter is now down to 0, right? And I got 2 years left. kind of my
Others.
therapy. It was my abilities to do things under my own pretenses, build a relationship, obviously, with the strength coach, because I'm always in there lifting weights. And it was just something that I just enjoyed. Like, it was not a chore. Like, if you coach athletes at any level, the large majority of them, lifting weights is a chore. It's something they have to do. It's not necessarily something they want to do. And that's something you have to accept as a strength and conditioning coach for athletes. So now I have 2 years. I wind up coming back later in that year. I played one game and then shut it down. It just wasn't there. So in 2 years of eligibility, I played in 5 games. Now the worst thing that could happen to me is we have a coaching change. And I'm like, right, like, here we go. But like you say, you make the best of coaching changes. And luckily for me, I made the best of mine, because when Bill Dooley came in and recognized me the first time, he said it, man, we got to get you healthy. You're the biggest guy I've seen here. He's coming from Virginia Tech and North Carolina, where they had Bruce Smith and Amos Lawrence and all these high-level dudes in the 80s. And we come to Wake Forest. He's used to seeing 20 guys that look like me, and I'm the only one he's got. So they again, now I'm working. At this point in time, this staff recognized my work in the weight room. It wasn't necessarily summer programs like there are now, but some of us started to begin to stay in the summer. And a lot of my teammates, and I was designated the leader, were told, find out when Big Joe's lifting and you train with him. And then I was told that if these guys don't train with you, it's on you. So you're gonna reap the repercussions of it. So that's really was and I've got guys who will tell you, as much as we loved our strength coach, there was some times in the summer where I was kind of the ringleader of getting the groups together to train. So we would train at like noon in North Carolina, because it was hot down there, and we were in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So if you guys understand what that means, Winston-Salem cigarettes, R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company was less than a mile away. 7 a.m. practices, you're gasping for air doing up downs, and all you're doing is smelling the tobacco burning from the factory. So it's a crazy world, but that gave me what I would consider my first unofficial coaching job. And we were I was writing programs out of Muscle and Fiction at that time. I mean, that's where we would get most of our information. I at that point, I had realized it was time to choose a major, and I knew I was going to head in that direction, because because again, here's my strength coach. I'm like, you can get paid to be a strength coach and lift weights and hang out and watch dudes lift weights. So I became a health and sports science major, continued to dominate weights. Met my wife during this time, going into my junior year, and she was an avid lifter at that time. She became one of my better training partners I had ever had my last 2 years, because she was into lifting and running. And back then, long distance running was still part of the conditioning plan. So we'd go out and run and all that other stuff. And, but then to piggyback stuff. So I wound up starting 2 years as an offensive lineman, not a defensive lineman. And I always say those guys, I always credit the coaches, Coach Dooley, Coach Jordan, and Coach Yoshida, for giving me a career, because I could have easily have been a never was. And I wound up being a has been, which is better than a never been. And I tell people, like, you say, man, that's a tough story, but is it really a tough story? I mean, I was a 2-year starter for a Division I football program. So I always go back to looking at the positives of not what should have, could have, would have happened. At the end of the day, as we all know, if you ask somebody who didn't have the opportunities I had and said, would you take a 2-year career as being a Division I starter? There's a lot of people that have raised their hand. So I feel fortunate enough to have done that. And I knew right away I was going to get into coaching. I was classified a medical reject from the NFL right off the bat, so there wasn't no sense of training and doing anything to prepare for a tryout. And I got into coaching right away. I coached 2 years of high school ball. Didn't want to coach on the field. Like, I wanted no part of coaching on the grass. I wanted to coach the entire team. I wanted to be in the weight room. I felt like, for whatever reason, that's where my passion was, and that's where I could give the most back to a team. But at that point in time, high school was not where I wanted to be, and now it's a great alternative for strength and conditioning coaches. but it was kind of non-existent. I mean, most of the people who ran the weight room were football coaches, and that's what I was. I was a line coach working the weight room. But I wanted to be a strength coach. But it gave me the opportunity to see if I could coach. You know, it's funny. We all say we want to coach, but yet now we get an opportunity, and it's like, oh, man, can you really coach? And that's what Pinecrest did for me. It gave me the confidence that, I can coach, and I'm pretty good at it. And I moved back to weight. I did try out for the World League of American Football, the old World League, and it failed that physical. And that's when I knew, okay, it's over. Your dream is shot. Get into it. But I had started powerlifting at that time because a buddy of mine at a gym in New York that I trained with at the summer was like, man, I can't believe you're done playing, but your competitiveness isn't over. You got to get into powerlifting. And I'm like, I'm not getting into powerlifting. I'm not strong enough. He goes, it has nothing to do with strong. It has to do with competing. And sure enough, he got me hooked. And I can, even now I'll jump into a deadlift meet here and there, but I've competed since 1989 as a powerlifter. And for about 20 years, pretty regularly. Then it kind of died off as family changes and injuries change your deal, and just time. It's just time to prepare for a meet the way you want to. So I went to after 2 years of Pinecrest, I went back to Wake Forest as a part-time assistant, and then my journey began at Boise and Arizona State, Utah, Louisville, and then the Panthers. So it's been a 32-year coaching journey, but a life probably from the time I'm 9. So what is that, 44 years of being somewhat involved in lifting weights and strength training on numerous different levels. So that's kind of my long story short. Still took 30 minutes. So.
Well,
it does.
It's a career, and it's fascinating always. I've known it. I've known your story, but there's always new things that I get to kind of hear when you talk about that. So where in your journey was it? Started at Pinecrest, headed back to Wake, or was it right around ASU that you kind of started to figure out, took what worked well for you growing up, what was working well for other people? How and where did we start to develop the tier system?
Well, that actually was really, it was funny because I just had a Zoom call this morning and I was telling this story. The true thought process of it actually came in 1991 when I first started at Boise State. One thing I would tell most of the listeners, if you're into coaching and you aspire to be a good program designer, is you study regardless of what you believe in. Like if you just let's just throw it out because now just an easy way to do it. Like if you believe in West Side, do yourself a favor. Learn everything else that's out there besides West Side. Learn how Eddie Cohn trained. Learn the high-intensity principles that Dan Riley used to win 3 Super Bowls with the Washington Redskins. Learn the Husker Power program of the 70s and 80s from Boyd Epley. You have, for you to be successful in what you want to design as a program designer, you have to know what is available to everyone else to figure out what has worked and why and how you dissect certain things. I think that is a key that people jump on these soapboxes and have no real clue that at the end of the day, the true greatness of the program is the talent that's doing the program. I mean, people say, well, the Redskins didn't win because Dan Riley did high-intensity training. You're probably right. They had really good players back then. But it had something to do with it. Michigan doesn't go to 30 straight bowl games doing high-intensity training, and then they replace the coach, and then they don't go to bowl games for 3 years. There's something behind what's going on, regardless, because Michigan's still going to get Michigan players. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, you're in the NFL, you're going to get good players. I mean, everybody's got them. There's a reason why it's a total package. That's what, remember that everybody wants to, especially in college, like, the strength program, the strength program, the strength program. You know what I'll tell you? I coached 19 years of college. It's give me some recruits, get me some recruits, get me some recruits, and then I'll show you a really good strength program. I mean, I've seen it. You win 15 games in the NFL, you're the greatest strength coach in the NFL. You're 6-10 the next year, you're just somebody else, and your program free agency killed you. A couple of wrong guys get hurt, a couple of trades. It all changes, man. Personnel is critical in the team concept of strength and conditioning. I always tell people the best strength and conditioning coach is your recruiting coordinator. He'll make you look really, really good. But to piggyback what you were talking about was back early on in strength and conditioning, as it was in its infancy of training. Remember, it kind of delved through football. So most of the football coaches in colleges began to understand, wait a second, strength and conditioning. Now Boyd Epley gets a lot of the credit for being the godfather of strength and conditioning because of how he was able to promote our profession at an age when no one really knew of it at all. But there was some NFL coaches, Sid Gilman with Alvin Roy, and they were doing this in the late 60s. But it's like anything else. It just took somebody to have the wherewithal to expose it to the masses. And that's where Boyd gets the godfather of strength and conditioning title for a lot of positive reasons. But you peel back some of the layers, you realize there was a lot of other strength and conditioning coaches that were making the moves and giving us the framework and the background we needed to be the successful opportunities that we have from a career, and the amount of respect we get from coaches across the world today is because of those people. But when I was at Boise State, I came in as a graduate assistant. And again, at this point in time, I have very little knowledge of designing programs outside of what I learned on my own and what I was accustomed to from my time at Wake Forest. Now, I will piggyback this by saying when I talk about learning things, you want to learn program design and training because you have to be able to justify the wherewithal of what you're trying to accomplish, especially when you're dealing with head coaches, because every head coach thinks they know weight training better than the weight coach. That's just the way it is. Learn to live with it. Find your ways to be able to exploit that. When I was at Wake, our strength coach was a high intensity based strength coach, but we would have hang cleans and things like that written into the program because that's what the football coaches wanted. I did a hang clean maybe 3 times in 5 years because even though it was on the card, it wasn't something that was anything we were ever going to do from a testing standpoint or things like that. We did jerks and everything was written in. And what I saw was, and again, I didn't know this at the time, I know this now, was I think one of the issues was the lack of justifying the goals of the program to the coaching staff that would have given it more support from the coaches. I mean, when coaches are telling you they want one thing and you're telling them you want another, it wasn't hard to figure out what was going on if you had any types of understanding of leadership and organization. And again, for me, wanting to get into this profession, I took a little bit more look through the eyes of both people to see what's going on. And the biggest thing was, hey, you better justify the means and the modes of what you're trying to accomplish with these programs. So as I'm at Boise State, again, very limited knowledge in program design. I'm thinking I'm going to go in there and learn some methods to the madness of program design. And I was very fortunate that the coach that hired me, Ron Thompson, gave me the freedom to do what I wanted. Like he just said, here's the sports, which were about 15 of them. Said, you got it. So I studied his programming and I knew what I was doing. It was the traditional 4-day split that most people were doing back at that time. The only real people who were doing 3-day-a-week work with college with athletes was the HIT type of group, which was predominantly machines, one set to failure. But I always, in the back of my mind, liked that whole body approach because that's what athletics is about, especially if you're not working with adaptive physical ed or adaptive athletes. Most of the team sports that I've coached, 2 feet on the ground, utilize total body movements throughout a period of time. So my first teams were that I would say my first predominant teams that I coached where I programmed for were women's basketball and women's volleyball. Gymnastics came on a little later, the tennis programs, but those were the 2 big ones to start off. So everybody sees me as a football guy, but I'm here today because of women's sports, in particular volleyball and women's basketball. And the volleyball coach was very open to program. She wasn't as her background. She had been at Boise for a while, so she was good with anything we were going to do. Just make their kids important. But the women's basketball coach had come from Stanford. And back then, if you follow history of women's basketball, Stanford was Tennessee and UConn before they were Tennessee and UConn. Tara Vanderveer in the late 80s and the 90s, that was the dominant force of women's basketball. And we just happened to have one of her assistants be the head basketball coach for Boise State. So she understood what was going on from the level of high-level women's hoops before a lot of other people. She was very progressive. She was great to work with, but she was demanding and she knew what she wanted. She was the one who really challenged me without knowing it, and I give her most of the credit for the tier system because she was her big thing, and her husband was her top assistant. She was tired of getting the old football programs. And that's what happened back in those days. Back in those days when these other sports started to jump aboard and there wasn't a lot of time and the staffs were very, very small, most of the other sports got old football programs. She wasn't feeling that. And most people who would know her personality would know that, yep, June probably wasn't feeling that. And that was so she sparked the challenge from me by just saying, I'm tired of getting the old football program. And really, I was already under my own assumptions of why are we training all these Olympic sport athletes 4 days a week anyway? Like, that just makes no sense to me. And I was looking at it already from the eyes of 99.9% of how we were writing programming, regardless, was coming from what I consider the strength disciplines. So if you and what your main background was in. So if your main background was in Olympic lifting, a lot of those programs looked like Olympic lifters. If you were from the sport of powerlifting, it really looked like a powerlifting program. And if you were from the sport of bodybuilding, it looked like a bodybuilding program. And even earlier strength coaches, that's where they were getting their material from the lifters. I mean, no one knew what we were doing. No one had a clue what was going on. And then you had, then you had the guys who believed in Arthur Jones's training mentality of one set to failure. Well, as you look at these things, and I don't know how I figured it out. I'll be honest with you. I mean, eureka moment, the aha moments that come up throughout your life. And I just was fortunate enough that I had the willingness to really go just what are we trying to do here, man? We're not trying to build this. We're trying to do that. I deal with women athletes at the time. That was I was predominantly the women's strength coach. It's like there is some merit to not having to do certain things that's on this football program. And what I found was, as I kept on looking and trying to figure things out, was, okay, there are components, and I didn't understand anything else about anything but movement patterns. I didn't understand rate of force development and all that stuff people talk about now. I just looked at it from movement and what the expectation the athletes were going to have when they went to practice. And the first thing I knew was, and back then, before we, back then there was, like I said, there was no dynamic effort method being talked about, speed and intent of load. Any exercise could be trained fast. So you had your explosive exercises, which were your Olympic lifting variations. And then you had your strength exercises, which were your powerlifting variations. And then you had your bodybuilding work, which generally filtered into all your ancillary work. But no one looked at it like that. They're like, oh, we're doing cleans to be explosive, and we're doing squats to be strong, and we're doing lat pull downs to just do lat pull downs, right? But remember what I told you, my first organized stuff when I went to college was HIT based. So it was we did lift 3 days a week at Wake, and we did do whole body work. I believe there was a lot of merit in that when it came to training athletes. Is it necessarily a great way to train an elite level power lifter or a weightlifter? Absolutely not. Very beginning people, probably, because it's just generalized, organized strength training program can get anybody strong starting off, and then you got to decipher off. But I looked at it like, Well, the whole body stuff, number one, makes way too much sense. And I knock off a day of training that opens up things to invest in other parts of athletic development, whether it be speed training, agility training, conditioning, etc., plyometric development, whatever those other KPIs and measurables we would look at as a strength and conditioning coach. Then it was, okay, how do you choose things that are beneficial to the athlete? I understood the Olympic lifting component about the explosiveness and that there is a high relativeness of importance of explosive strength in training an athlete. But what I really thought with my limited knowledge of Olympic lifting at that time was it was a total body movement because of the synchronized movement pattern that was utilized and how many muscle groups and, like I said, a synchronized pattern of movement had to be done efficiently to accomplish the lift is a lot like the motor patterns and the motor development of certain movements in sprinting and running, blocking and tackling. It's all synchronized, it's whole body approach. So I wasn't 100% like the total body lifts or the Olympic lifts were primarily for explosiveness, but they had a relative transferable component for total body action that happens in sport. And then if you want to talk about the legitimacies of triple extension and its relativeness to jumping ability and stuff like that, I mean, that was a secondary asset. I was looking at everything from what happens on the field versus what happens in a weight room. And that's when it became, looking at it from a 2-day split versus a 3-day whole body was, well, the truth is, in the actions of practice, if the entire body's being utilized, why wouldn't I want to do that in a weight room setting instead of splitting the body up into upper and lower? And there's some merit to it. People still do it with a high level of success. But my thought process was relatability to athletic development, not relatability to lifting weights. And going back to the challenge from June of, I'm tired of doing the old football programs. So that was how the basis of it came up. And then it was, okay, now what's it look like? And that's when you get into how we're going to classify exercises, how the rotation of the exercise is going to be built. And for just to wrap it up quick. So for my terminology, a whole body training session has 3 categories of exercise choices, and they're total body movements, lower body movements, and upper body movements. And the basic definitions are total body movements are predominantly Olympic lifting variations or anything that has a hip hinge. Lower body knee dominant movements. Upper body, obviously anything above the belly button that has horizontal, vertical pressing, shoulder, abduction, horizontal, abduction, circumduction, all the movements of the shoulder, flexion, extension of the arm, wrist flexors, etc. And then it goes into deeper as you pick rules. As everybody's pool will be different on some of the ancillary choices of where you classify your exercises, and that's completely up to the program designer. Even how you rank them in orders of designing a program. Like in one conversation I had earlier today, like one of the intriguing exercises that could be up for debate with coaches if you're utilizing a program similar to mine is the hip thrust. Is it a lower body exercise or is it a total body exercise? For me, I consider it a total body exercise because it's hip extension, where some people consider it a lower body exercise. But for me, it has some type of hinge. It's hip related, so I throw that as a total body lift. And then the guy I was talking to goes, well, we classify it as a lower body lift. It's not up for debate. That's as long as you know where it fits in your program, then you know where to put it when you're designing programs. Like for me.
So to build off of that real quick, Joe, like give us your top 2 favorite full body exercises, lower body exercise, upper body exercises, your go-to, 2 of each. And just because I just want to know, one lift of each that you think is completely overrated and should be thrown out of everybody's program.
All right, well, a lot of it, I'll try to generalize it because a lot of it changes with the level of the athlete. But if I would say right now, total body lifts would be a high handle trap bar deadlift and a snatch grip power pull from the block.
Okay, and then overrated full body?
For athletes?
Yes.
Having to do a full competition snatch.
Thank you. All right, let's go to upper body.
Upper body, if you can do chin-ups, you can't do enough chin-ups or pull-up variation. If you can't, as I can't, sucks to be me, right? But to me, what I've learned, and a lot of people have talked about it, and you know this, Jesse, if you want to be super strong in the weight room, the strongest guys I've ever coached and the strongest guys I've ever been around that I've been able to see live in a strength training profession can do relative strength work very, very well. Like the most pound for pound, the strongest athletes I ever coached were gymnasts and wrestlers. Oh, what's your best relative strength athletes? Gymnasts and wrestlers. Yep. And so for me, I would tell anybody who's training adolescent kids, the faster you can get them to do chin-ups or whatever your variation is, the better. And the other thing that I would say is I believe in overhead pressing before bench pressing, because now I know what I think is you teach an athlete earlier on, you won't have the thoracic extension problems that I have. Like you have like for me, if I have what I consider heavy overhead press with my limitations in the thoracic spine, I'll have some low back soreness after a heavy press day because of my capabilities as an overall athlete and probably a lot of beaten wear and tear. But the earlier you can get an athlete involved in programming, you probably won't have those issues because a lot of that stuff will be worked through. It's just like range of motion in a squat. And from that standpoint is what I'm looking at is from that and chin-ups, even though it was a huge part of my block zero stuff that I think you might talk about later.
Yeah.
Those are what I call use it or lose it. I think you would agree. If you get to the point where you're very competent at the body weight exercise and you think, oh, I don't have to do them anymore, you'll lose that capability extremely fast. And it's funny how you watch how people's growth and development is. I can talk to you about my two sons when it comes particularly with chin-ups. Totally different athletes. One was natural. One's a hard gainer. One knew he was natural. One works his balls off. I mean, it's so when I first exposed my oldest son to training, one of my tests were for block zero and beginners is the old chin-up hold. Like if someone couldn't do a chin-up, the old presidential physical fitness stuff, you'd go chin over the bar and you hold for as long as you could. Well, the very first day, my oldest son, and they started about the same age, he could do it for a minute already. So I was like, okay, you can already do chin-ups. And sure enough, he could already do chin-ups. He could climb rope. He could do a glute ham day one, all that cool stuff. Now, my youngest son, the very first day, he did a negative chin-up. He lasted 0 seconds. I mean, as soon as I let go, he was gone. And now you piggyback that to, what was that about? Louisville. That would have been 12. You piggyback that a dozen years later, and then here's my youngest son, who's a hammer thrower now at Iowa State. He's at tier 5, so he's at the end of his workout, and he threw for 3 hours before that. He's at the end of his strength training workout. We're doing a medley, and he goes neutral grip, dead hang. He goes 13, 10, 10, and he's 240 pounds. Now, 240, 13 dead hangs, very little kipping. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to self-plug my YouTube show, Inside the House. It's on that YouTube, one of the training sessions. It's on there, so you can go and get it validated. Because I know if you're like me and you think you're from Missouri, you're from the Show Me State, you got to have that stuff documented. So that is documented, that he went 13, 10, 10, which 13 was a one-set PR, and 33 reps was a volume PR. So the fact that he was able to do 3 sets of 10 in a circuit fashion with other movements really shows the work ethic and the capabilities that he has derived from. So I just think, and I know Joe DeFranco's talked about chin-ups and sprinting. So there's a lot to be said about being able to handle your body weight, not only in the upper body movements, but lower body too. Pistol squats extremely hard, Nordic leg curl, Russian leads. Those things are things that no one talks about, and that's why no one's good at it. But if you believe in that stuff and you get your kids early into those types of developmental programming, you got a chance to be successful. But now there's certain things that I've learned too with organization at a younger age is you take the fun away from it, it's not going to work out well. And I took the fun away from it with my oldest, and he doesn't go in a weight room at all now. And he was one of the most naturally gifted lifters. I've had several weightlifting coaches that wanted to train him as a weightlifter. He could still do a pistol squat right now if I call him out. But he just, it just, so make sure you always put the fun in fundamentals. Because like my most of us, I'm sure on this Zoom meeting, their first experiences in a weight room was curls, benches, and doing that Arnold Schwarzenegger get right. His was glute hams, chin-ups, single leg squats, and climbing a rope. I mean, how much fun was that? So, but at all that body weight stuff, he can kill it. Like it was just legitimate. And that's something that I believe in, that early on you can get those things into a program and they can actually do them with success. It's just going to make them that much more stronger when they actually get a load in their hand. And then, as you know, and then the most overrated upper body work is barbell bench press for athletes. I mean, it's just, again, it is. In fact, to me, there's more beneficial to dumbbell work than there is. I like the overhead press with a barbell starting off because, boy, you talk about overhead balance and learning how to apply force into the ground with your feet, because it's not just pushing the bar over your head. As you're pushing the bar over your head, you've got to push your feet through the ground to stabilize yourself. So there's a lot of cool interactions, even though it's an in-place movement. There's just a lot more merit to being again, because in this day and age, there's so many high-level adaptive athletes. I want to make sure that I'm not trying to relegate this, because there's guys now, like Jesse, that have no use of their legs that are bench pressing 600 pounds with no leg drive.
Right.
So I don't want to disassociate that, and I'm talking about the types of athletes that I train on a regular basis, which is team sport competition, both feet on the ground, and a lot of standing and running. So I want to make sure that we don't get into that fray of, what about the athletes who can't do that? I understand that. I want to make sure that we will train them throughout, and you can train them on a tier system. We just have to rebuild our overhead, our things that we would like to do standing, and try to find the variations that we aren't able to do.
How about lower body? 2 go-tos and then 1 overrated.
To me, and this has come a long way, the go-to now is front squat for athletes. Coming through my powerlifting era, I was a big back squat king of exercises. And I just think from a posture assessment and from a protection assessment, it's just, again, it's in this day and age of what we know and how we have to be very, very aware of what's going on with the athletes and what they know. You can't have a bad front squat. Like, you can't muscle up a bad front squat. Where
right.
We've seen it because we've competed in powerlifting. You can have a terrible, shitty back squat and get credited with a number. And that's the same thing with doing cleans in college. You can get credited with a number with something that doesn't even look anything related to what a pure classical clean should look like. So for me, it's front squat. The second one, it's hard because I could say the rear foot elevated squat, but then I could say the pistol squat. But I also could say any variation of a lunge or a step up. But if you're making me have to choose, I am. All right, I would pick one of my all-time favorite hybrids is a reverse lunge to step up with a barbell.
Okay.
Those would be my two. If you're making me really, really go out on a limb, I would say front squat and the reverse lunge to step up is a quality movement because it's a pseudo single leg work and you're getting what I would consider like a horizontal and vertical action combined. And then even a better one than that is a lateral lunge to a lateral step up because now you're getting some frontal plane. So you can be creative as you want, but you make me pick two. I'll stick with the basic regular forward reverse lunge to a basic step up. And make sure the step up height doesn't go higher than thigh parallel to the ground. I think sometimes people get a little too creative and want to go super high on the step up, and it takes away a little bit. It might be a greater range of motion, but it takes away from trying to alleviate as much of back foot drive as you can. That's why it's pseudo single leg. And then eccentrically, man, unless you have super strong legs, that's a long lower.
And then overrated?
Overrated lower body lift. Well,
I got Joe Kenn to stop talking to be stumped.
Well, okay, from
athletic. Mark that down.
All right, and again, I think it got overhyped early. I don't know if I would probably consider this a total body lift because I would consider it a hinge, but one that I've kind of, the more and more I study, and people are going to go crazy when I say this, I'll throw it in because it's a posterior chain movement, is the reverse hyper for athletes.
Okay.
I think it's way more. Why? Because when you really, really look at what it was created for as a traction-based device, I don't know if our guys train heavy enough over a long period of time to need traction. I think there's other ways we can do that. I think there's merit to having them in your weight room after super heavy sessions if a guy is that kind of guy. But overall, we went crazy on reverse hypers, and the older I've gotten and really see the necessity of where it fits, like I never wrote it in 9 years in an NFL program. We never wrote a reverse hyper, a true reverse hyper. And what I've also found is why I believe overall is the most of the capabilities of athletes are not that of professional powerlifters. And you can get more bang for your buck with a lot of athletes by doing a reverse hyper with just a 10-pound med ball squeezed between their legs. So I think the loaded version of a reverse hyper to me, and this is something, Jesse, really, if you had asked me this 5 years ago, I don't know if I answered that way or even contemplate this. This has happened a lot with my own training because now, even for myself, I only use reverse hypers with like 110 pounds. It's strictly for traction.
Sure.
It's a way slower movement. I remember when we first all got caught up, I got 450 pounds. I'm swinging the shit out of it. I got people holding it down so the machine won't move. And again, I'll tell you who really woke me up to thinking like this was Matt Wenning when he started talking about how he trains with compression versus traction movements. And I do think it has merit for traction, but I do think it's kind of gotten overrated. And I really like to see how many colleges who have them in their weight room are really prescribing the movement.
You know what, Joe? I had you answering that question narrowed down to two things, and I was right on the one. The other one I thought you were going to throw out there, one that you and I have talked about extensively. I thought you were going to throw the box squat bomb in there.
Well, here's the thing with the box squat.
The classic Louis style, West Side style box squat.
But because I don't teach that way, I wouldn't have thought that way. And again, and that's where people, and I get it, man. This is a debate. This debate is going to go on forever. But that's why people will talk about the way I perform a box squat. People would say, well, you're just squatting to a box, and they'll say, well, but here's what you know because you've been there. Here's what Smelly knows because he'd been there and you guys trained there. And here's what, if you read the early articles on box squatting in 1990s in Powerlifting USA, was this. It was said specifically that doing a box squat was supposed to mimic the technique you would use in a meet if you pulled the box away. That's how it was very firstly defined when they talked about box squatting. And then it became the release the hip flexors, which I still don't know what that means. And
still, it's impossible.
Yeah, then you roll back, which now you've doubly compressed the spine. So you have spinal compression anyway, axial loading with the amount of load you have on a barbell back squat. Now I've added 300 pounds of band tension to improve that compression even worse. But then you want me to sit on a box with more compression and then roll into hyperextension and compress those spine even more. But then relax the hip flexors, roll up and catapult up. And again, here's the other thing too about that, as you know, Jesse. When it was first, again, another one that was told, when you started the box squat, you were only supposed to box squat in a loose suit. So like one size looser than what you would use in competition. By the time it was all said and done, those guys were wearing their double layered briefs and their competition bottoms on box squat day. It became a max effort session.
Yep.
So
100%.
yeah, I would say the rolling box squat, I believe the box squat has a lot of merit if it's utilized correctly. Like my thing with the relaxation of the hips is, as you know, if you're teaching sprinting, or in your case with the amount of baseball players you work with, if you're teaching them how to steal first, they're on first and they're trying to steal a base, how can you relax your hip flexors? They have to be in a rigid, loaded position to turn and sprint and react. Just like if I've got an offensive lineman, relax your hip flexors. And the ball snapped, where's he going? He's going on his ass.
Backwards, yep.
So there's a lot of things, again, and that, like, you know, that you can fire some people up with that debate. But I've come to the conclusion to not get into those fights with people that, okay, if you think what I do is called squatting to a box, I'm cool, fine.
Right.
But I like it from a teaching standpoint because it can really help with knowing a beginner's limitations. Like the one story I always say with utilizing the box squat and evaluation newcomers, and this was part of my assessment, was I had one of my very first clients when I opened up Big House Power when I got let go at Louisville, was an eighth grade kid who was 6'5", 240 pounds, and his grandfather brought him to me. And you know just as well as I do, if that guy walks into a high school weight room in eighth grade at 6'5", 240, you already know what those coaches are doing.
Yep.
So I bring him in and we're doing a bunch of assessments. And typical, man, he's 6'5", he's an eighth grader. He doesn't know nothing. So we're doing we're doing a box squat test. And I had a 16-inch box. That was my standard. But he wound up being able to, under control, from a standpoint of his eccentric strength, his hamstring strength, his groin and abductor strength, he was only able to squat to a 26-inch box under control. And by the time we were done, he was able to squat to the 16-inch box. Now, this is just body weight. But this is where you want to talk about how you can improve people's strength levels without any weight. Here it is, just on range of motion. And the competency of what he was able to do. Now, you're cleaning up technique weekly, and as he's increasing his range of motion, he's only getting stronger and more mobile. And in between that, you're doing iso lunge holds and things like that, and you're doing your back extension, you're doing planks out the butt, you know. So it was just one big piece of the puzzle. So I know a lot of people, regardless of Louis Simmons style or box squatting like bigger, faster, stronger, there's merit to utilizing the box as a teaching tool if you emphasize eccentric control, because you've seen it too. How many guys think a box is a stability ball and they slam down on the box? The box ain't helping you get up, buddy. It's a damn solid piece of material.
So you kind of touched on it a couple different times throughout talking. Can you walk us through block zero?
Well, block zero generally to me means what the training age of the athlete is that you're coaching. It does not necessarily mean they have a training age of 0 overall, but if an athlete is new to your facility, they come in with a training age of block 0. Obviously, you're going to take a little bit of the history of what they've done, who they've done it with, because again, you may hold somebody in higher regard than another, and you know their coaching capabilities to another. But at the end of the day, the truth is they're coming to you for you to coach them, and you've never coached them before, so they come in at a 0 training age. From there, you do your assessments. Depending on what age bracket they're in, depends on what that program will look like. To me, the block 0 concept was really designed for freshman athletes, whether coming to high school or college, so you can expose them to the primal movements that will be needed to do more of the external load. We had just found that too many guys were coming in to the program with so many deficiencies that it was not in our best practices or purposes to throw these guys into the weight room anymore. And it took a long time to have the respect level from the coaches and even the confidence to go to a football coach and say, hey, we're not lifting weights for 6 weeks. These guys get on campus, or not lifting heavy, out of technique based. And again, it's primarily based off of gymnastic strength or relative strength movements. How well can you do an iso back extension hold? How well can you do an iso lunge hold? How well can you do a body weight squat? Can you do a push up rather than a hip down? How well can you do a chin up? How well can you do a posterior? We would do a posterior T-raise hold to see how well their posterior shoulders were. Then you would do some single leg rear foot elevated squat thing. So anything that lunge, tremendous amount of lunge work. Like I mean, for beginners, people exposed to strength training, you can't do enough lunges. I mean, in all different planes, even though the transverse plane is a little bit what I would call advanced, I think because you're going to be doing movements in those types of realms on your field work, you can expose that in a body weight and an introductory point. So it's the one thing I will tell you is we're working on different people who have it. The block zero is a concept, and how you mold that concept is very specific. A block zero concept for baseball players may look a little bit different than football players depending on the age bracket. But if you're coming into a weight room the first time as a 10-year-old or an 8th grader, it's going to be the same. Like, can't do enough planks, how to do a plank correctly, which helps with a push-up position. Just proper movement. It's almost like movement before muscle. Can we do these basic, what I call internally loaded movements with no load except for what you have versus transferring to external load movement? And again, what you know is, and that's kind of like the farm boy strength mentality. That's what you're trying to do with this relative strength, is to build farm boy of capabilities. Because I'm 100% weight room strong, and I think that's why I have a lot of shoulder issues, a lot of low back issues, because everything that I've done from a strength standpoint has been weight related, like externally loaded. I was never really exposed to doing chin-ups. I mean, I think the only really when I got exposed to chin-ups was in college, because in high intensity training, 2 of the big lifts are negative chins and dips. So I think the most I had ever gotten to in my life was 7 chin-ups at 300 pounds, which that's not bad, but now I can't do one. So again, use it or lose it. I wish I would trade everything I do now to be able to do even one set of 1 chin-ups, let alone multiple sets. So it's something I'm starting to get my brothers back into when I start up my new training plan, where I've got elbow and shoulder, so I got to figure out how I want to work that in. But I am definitely going to do, even if it's assisted, some type of chin-up variation more often in my programming, because I'd like to be able to say I can at least do one regardless. But even like dips, I mean, I won't even attempt to do a dip now, as bad as my shoulders and tricep issues and elbow issues have been. But that's something like, golly, I wish I could. Like, I watch guys nowadays, like, hammer out, like Big John, he'll hammer out, full range of motion dips with 4 plates on and smoking. I'm like, man, I'd like to just do one negative dip, negative only, and I'll step back up. But you remember even back in the day where one of the high volume repetition method works for triceps that Louis did was quarter dips, remember?
Yep.
They'd load up them quarter dips. So again, it's things we're trying to build on programming, but it's like gymnastic strength, tumbling, fundamental free play. Like, you can have your organized stuff, but at some point you got to turn these kids loose. 1, because you want discovery. And 2, because I think we've started kids now at such a younger age of organized activity that we have not creating leaders. Our lack of leadership is starting at the adolescent and youth ages, because most of the kids who had to go to a playground and figure out who was going to make the team captains and who was going to establish themselves as the proponent leaders of what positions people played, that's all dictated to kids now. And then we want to know why when they get to college, we're paying people 30, 40, 50 grand to come in and teach leadership courses. You can save yourself a lot of money, or we could have, if we were still doing playground work. But in this day and age, most parents are so guarded to let their kids play free. And just like, like when I was growing up, Saturday morning, maybe my dad would cook breakfast because my mom worked on Saturdays. I'd take my bike out at like 8 o'clock and wouldn't come home till the 4:30 whistle. And a lot of that was just because we were running around. And then back in those days, too, a lot of people wanted their kids gone all day because they didn't have enough money to feed them. So like, oh, we'll just wait till the end of the day. But for us, where I live, the fire whistle always blew on Saturdays at 4:30. So that, that was like an automatic curfew. Like at 4:30, you just see wherever you were in Inwood, the 4:30 whistle blows, everybody jumping on their bikes and sprinting home because it was like you had wherever you were, you had 10 minutes to get home from the 4:30 whistle. But you don't see that anymore. Like even when we were still in high school, we would do pickup football games at the golf course, or like we were from Inwood and another town, Lawrence, Cedarhurst. We all filtered in the same high school, but so the kids from Cedarhurst were like, hey man, pick 11 guys and I'll pick 11 guys and we'll meet over at Inwood Park and we'll play some football, or play baseball. That doesn't happen. And then we want to know why people don't have the capabilities to step up to the plate and take the lead in something. It's like, oh man, I wish you'd be a better leader. Well, we kind of deterred them from being a leader.
So let's step away from kind of the training side of things and step into the business aspects real quick while we still have you, Joe. As someone who, I consider, a very important figure in the strength and conditioning community, what advice would you give someone who's starting out, who has aspirations to either be, a professional, own their own facility and or start to go ahead and get into strength and conditioning side of things in a collegiate aspect or in a professional aspect?
The first thing I would say is learn the history of your trade. I think too many people just think they know everything and don't understand why there is a opportunity to be a strength coach or even a private sector. Like I consider, like I just had this like Jesse's in the private sector. Now I'm in it, but Jesse to me is not a personal trainer. He is a private sector coach, and that is relationship to he coaches athletes. Now in the general pop scheme of things, he's a personal trainer. But in the athletic things, he's a private sector coach. And you have to differentiate that because that's not fair to those people who work in sports performance facilities and get labeled as a general pop title when they're not. The private sector has exploded. And again, when you learn the history of it, there was people before Mark Verstegen and API and Exos, but it was his vision and how he promoted private sector elite training coaches that have made it what it is today. Now, there was the Mike Boyles and the Chip Smiths and the guys down and the Lawrence Seagraves before that and what they were doing at Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy before Mark exploded. The same way I explained about with Boyd Epley. Know where you came from so you know what to do and understand who to study and why they've had such sustainable careers. So I think knowing the history of where you're headed is very, very important. And not where you have to be a historian, but enough to know that strength training didn't start with Louis Simmons. That makes sense. And I'm a big fan of Louis. He's opened my eyes and opened up many eyes to everybody who's out there in the world of strength training, whether it's on the professional, collegiate, powerlifting, etc. But even then, like we talked about, read between the lines. Something's always missing, something always not compatible to what you're trying to do. The other thing I would say is find you some mentors. Like, Jesse, I have the utmost respect for Jesse. I was telling my wife last night that I love Jesse and Mark but Jesse, I consider Jesse one of my virtual coaches. So because of the regard that I have, because here's what you learn about when you're honest with yourself and I probably knew this a long time ago when I would go to when I went to Dave and Jim Wendler's seminars. Here's what you learn about yourself when you're a strength and conditioning coach for athletes. And I say this in coaching technique. It's really about a level of competency. Like, how well can you competently get things across to your athletes? Because when it comes to exercise technique, I don't need a competitive athlete. I don't need a competitive lifter who plays football. I need a competitive football player who's competent in lifting. And what happens with the strength and conditioning coach, because there's so much things intermingled. Like, if you really ask me what I am an expert in, I'm an expert in competently structuring high number group training sessions for athletes. That's what I'm an expert in. I'm extremely competent, and in some ways exceptionally competent in programming and some other things. But like in exercise technique in particular, I'm above competency, but I don't know if I can consider myself a professional. Like, when I listen to Dave Tate and guys like Jesse break down a squat or a deadlift, I don't have that skill set. I have the skill set to be very, very good at the guys that I coach, because they ain't going into no meets, and they're not going to deadlift 1,000 pounds or 800 pounds. It's just like, if you wanted me to coach you as a power lifter, I can coach you to deadlift and squat and bench press 600, 600, and 400, and then you got to go find somebody else. Because to train guys who have done that heavier loads than that, that's just it's a different mindset that I can't discuss. And two, it's different training. So know your role is very, very important. Know where you are and really try to evaluate what you are. Like, it took me a long time to really coach. Like, what are you really, really good at? I'm really good at getting a bunch of dudes to work hard, or a bunch of women to work hard in a group setting with a highly organized plan and extremely competent lifting. The other thing I'd say, and again, that goes back to mentorship, having people who you are willing to listen to criticism, because most people don't like criticism. And the hardest criticism is self-criticism. Like, what can you do for yourself that you know if you look in the mirror you can't lie about? That's extremely hard. I would say, as far as education, the number one education you can do is coach. I mean, everybody wants to talk about read a book a month, or I've read 10,000 pages this year. That's all fine and well, but if you can't coach, it doesn't matter. So get on the floor and coach. You want your best professional development is to keep coaching. That's why I want to know. Like, for me, luckily my son was with me all summer, so I got to coach a lot this summer. But now for me to continue to coach, I've got to find ways to figure that out on my own, to get back into some type of floor coaching to keep my skills alive. And again, what you learn is in coaching, if you say, like Jesse asked, what levels do you want to coach at? I don't know what kind of coach you want to be. Because if you coach professionals, you're managing. If that makes sense. You'll have some guys you still get to develop your practice squad, some younger rookies who still need development in the O-line, D-line, possibly. More so now with the way the offenses have changed in football. But if you want to be a developer, then you want to be a youth coach, like in the private sector, adolescent coach, or a high school coach. If you want to be an individual who continues to be a developer, but also have more of an impact on life, then you might want to be a college coach, and more possibly, a more mature high school kid who gets that you're not berating him and trying to make him cry, that you're trying to teach them how to be adults. So it comes into those things. Like, what is your aspirations? Like, what do you see yourself? Like, I've learned a lot, like communication. Everybody talks about communication, but what I've really learned about communication after 9 years in the NFL is a lot of times your message is correct. It's how the tone and the verbiage you use. So like in the early 90s, most strength coaches for football in college, F this, F that, you're soft, you're a P, you're this, you don't work hard. Woo, 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 woo. It was like they beat them down, negatively crush them, and then build them up. Well, what you learn in the pros is you can't do that to professionals. And although the message is the same, the tone and the ability to communicate is different. And I wouldn't change. It's just an evolution of who you are and a maturity process. But I know this, that as well as I got my message across in the 90s, that if I go back to college in the 2020s for what I learned in the NFL, I will be so much more proud of myself and know that my thoughts would resonate even deeper with the athletes of this age. So that's another thing you want to really study is communication and knowing your clientele. Like you're in a large group setting, you have to remember you're going to have a big bell curve of people, different personalities, different emotional statuses, because they come from a large variety of places. You're in West Side Barbell, that mentality is pretty much the same. They're all hardcore, I'm going to break you down people. That whole mentality and communication is different and can be relative to almost everybody in there because they only let like-minded people in the gym. But when you're dealing with kids that are redshirt freshmen at 18 and fifth-year seniors are at 22, and you're addressing the entire mob, so to speak, you've got to be well aware of how your approach is because you can't single out guys who are not ready to be singled out when you're trying to reprimand somebody. And you have to, so it becomes like Jesse said, that's the psychosocial aspects of coaching is really try, not that you got to be like a book report on every kid, but know enough to know that you got to know when to hold them, you got to know when to fold them, and you have to establish a staff that has personality traits different from you because as much as I've been very successful with the majority of athletes I've coached, there's always those outliers that I need help from a coach that has a different personality that resonates with that athlete more than mine does.
So like we talked about earlier, I've always been impressed at, you know, the not only the length of your career, but kind of the changes and everything that you've had as you've gone through things. If you could kind of point to one or two things that has helped you accomplish things at all these different levels, what is that drive? What is that reason? What is your why that has gotten you through your career and gotten you to this point?
You know, people ask me that a lot of times because I think I've had a good mix of programming and personality. And a lot of times, as you know, Jesse, that's not necessarily the way it goes in strength and conditioning and athletics. Usually you have really good programmings with a dry demeanor personality. And nowadays you got all these guys with the hype show that really have limited programming, but because they hype guys up, they kind of the new wave of coaches. But I mean, my biggest, you read enough to interpret things. And I read a book, my why probably has changed several times. At this point in my time, I'm on the opposite side of halftime. And what you learn in career path is that first half of your career, regardless of what field you're in, it's success driven, right? I got to win. I got to be the man. I got to make more money than you. You know, the arrogance and the ego is not necessarily cockiness, but it's more displayed as your client, as you start to pick up a little kudos for what you do. And then, you know, but you still have the same mission. Like my mission has always been to be a mentor, like to give back in any way I can. And because a lot, even though I had great people that helped me get to where I am, I would consider myself self-taught in this field. I did a lot of things on my own. I created a unique training plan that I thought was going to be a niche, and now it's known worldwide. Extremely humbling and just like ridiculously honored that that's occurred. But now I'm at that point where I'm on the other end. So now it's about significance. So my why when people ask me is I owe you, I owe the individuals who have stayed on the line today to share my story and be as honest and opinionated. And I reserve the right to be wrong. There's so many ways to do this that it's really irrelevant. I mean, like I said, you got the right person in the weight room, you're going to get them wherever you want. or even in life, if you have the people who are willing to listen and really understand and know that you do deep down have their best interests at heart. So my point now is like I owe my wife and my kids and my grandkids to be the best that I can be at what I do. I owe it to myself that if I'm going to consider myself and hold myself at a standard, can I continue to work at that standard? I owe it to people like yourself who say that I'm a mentor to you to keep being driven to figure things out, to be honest with those same people, to let them know, hey, for as much as I'm a mentor to you, you're a mentor to me, because there's stuff that you know that I don't know. And to be willing to say that. A lot of people are unwilling to tell you what they don't know. And what I found out is when you do that and then you try to make stuff up in this world, you're going to get checked. So I'd rather tell you, I don't know, but I got the people that do know. Let me get back to you. And that's why I say, I know what I'm an expert at. Like, that's what I'm good at. And I'll be the first one to tell you, you talk to a guy like yourself, a Dave Tate, a Jim Wendler, guys like that, from exercise technique, in particular in the power lifts, you guys are friggin' expert professional lifting coaches. I can learn from you. If you want to talk about Olympic weightlifting, then I'm going to go to high qualified Olympic weightlifting coaches. Nutrition, I'm going to go to legitimate nutrition people. Guys need to run faster, I'm going to go to people who know how to run sprints. Like one of the most intelligent strength coaches, and I think you'll agree, is Buddy Morris. Like, that guy is legitimately one of the most smartest strength coaches, if not the smartest overall strength coach that I've ever been. And we don't train the same way. As much as I would tell you that, his training modality is way different than mine.
Yeah.
But what I like is he took advantages of certain situations in his career that put him in a category that most strength coaches cannot even imagine, where, people don't understand. Like, during one of his hiatuses of college strength and conditioning, spent 5 years working in a hospital setting where he watched surgeries with orthopedic surgeons every single day. I don't care how much time we even look at it, we're never going to be able to talk about the human body like he does.
Yeah.
And his concepts of training with training on most of his athletes, like sprinters and stuff like that, is because he's evolved through the methodologies of not only Louis' stuff in the weight room, but Charlie Francis. So now he's in Arizona, and Buddy's a big professional development guy, spent a lot of time at Altus. So you see the genre, but I have a high level respect level for him. His knowledge base is way different than mine, and at a different stratosphere than pretty much any other strength coach I've ever met. A guy like Jeff Connors. Jeff Connors is a typical man-made strength coach, but what he delved in was, because he worked with certain coaches that emphasized speed as far as what a speed looks like from a 40-yard dash concept, he really learned the concept of sprinting and how to adapt it to a team setting, to where I would say, just based on what I know, that I would consider Jeff Connors the most competent speed coach with people with a strength conditioning background, with not necessarily coming from a track background, if that makes sense. Obviously, the ideal sprint coaches are the Dan Potts of the world, the Lawrence Seagraves, and guys like that. But I'm talking about dudes like us who are in the weight room and have figured out different niches. That's, to me, like the guys who have done a great job in nutrition. Where me, I hold my hat on programming, which I think I can hold myself and write a program as good as anyone else. And that's where I talk about. I try not to stay. You don't hear me talking about plyos. You don't hear me talking about sprinting. Although I'm competent in those areas, I'm not the expert. I have other people that I would consider the expert in those areas.
Well, Coach, before we let you go, I just wanted to let everyone know this is something that a lot of people don't know about you, but you are credited with, and Cam has credited you particularly with teaching him how to dab. Is that true?
I would say absolutely not. I don't dab. And, Cam, I will say this about Cam. I'll be very interested to see. I believe Cam will wear off more on Bill Belichick than Bill Belichick will wear off on Cam, because that's just the type of guy he is. But two things that people need to know about Cam Newton. One, he's one of the hardest workers in the room. That's non-debatable. He's one of the toughest guys you will have on a football field. Non-debatable. He wants to win, and regardless of what you see, who are we to judge someone's personality and how they want to express themselves? But my assistant, Jason Bengucci, trained him pretty much one-on-one for 7 years. Their rapport was undeniable, to a fact where I didn't touch that. I almost literally stayed away, because that's how much I trusted Jason, and that's how much I respected that relationship, that I didn't want it to be like, well, I'm the head guy, I got to get credit for Cam, and I got to go in there and butt in. Like, me and Cam were cool, but I said their relationship resonated better, and because of Jason's skill set as a programmer compared to mine, it fit what we needed to do with Cam. So the uniqueness of what it all came down to, and again, that's what goes about developing a quality staff. But Cam and the Dab, I mean, that was an exciting year. I don't know why we stopped doing it. Maybe if we would have kept doing it, we'd still have jobs and still be in it. But yeah, he's a very unique guy. I wish him all the best, man. I just hope that in some ways, he's been very, very professional, and so will I be. But it'd be really, really nice for him to have an extremely successful season after the way he was let go by the Panthers.
Well, hey, we're going to let you go here, Coach. Let us know where we can find you, what you're up to, what's going on with Big House Power, and what you have coming up in the near future. Kind of pimp your wares, if you will. And, just want to say thank you so much for taking your time. It's extremely valuable, the knowledge and the words that you spit, and just the time that you have. And to be able to spend some time with us on a Wednesday morning is amazing. So thank you for that. Where can we find more of Coach House?
Yeah, so first of all, my new job is the Director of Performance Education for Dynamic Fitness and Strength, a strength equipment company based out of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. So if you're in the Midwest, we're a Midwest-based company. Pretty astounding abilities to manufacture quality equipment. And I run the educational arm, as well as serve as a brand ambassador for them, or an influencer. And one of the things that I want to start pumping, I don't know if you guys on Instagram at Dynamic Fitness Strength, we have a 60-second strength coach that we do on Wednesdays that ties into a blog. So there's some really good educational content on our site. As far as me personally, bighousepower.com, on Instagram and Twitter at bighousepower. We are working on getting some digital downloads to a lot of my material on our store. That's our big project now. But as Jesse knows, we are working on, or I am working on, with a little bit of help from guys like Jesse giving me some critiquing on how to make sure it's a very quality product, is most of us who are tied into Louis Simmons and lifting or been aware of the Prilipin's chart. And like Jesse said, depending on who you talk to, Prilipin chart is either really, really good or really, really bad and non-existent. And because of my vision and scope, I've read between the lines of Prilipin's chart and actually created my own charts based off Prilipin, utilizing his principles and reasoning to a point where it is truly relatable to working with athletes when it comes to strength. To a point where I am creating a course on teachable.com called Reading Between the Lines. And then the subtitle, with Jesse's help, is going to be talking about dissecting and implementing percentage-based training cycles utilizing Prilipin's chart. So that's in the works. It's a little bit interesting to design a course. It'd be a mini course. I'm looking at it hopefully to be probably about a 2-hour deal, where we have a certificate of completion, a quiz, CEUs if you're a certified strength coach, and something that would give it a lot more credibility in the field of training athletes and even weightlifters and powerlifters, and give you the opportunity to see where Prilipin's chart, if you really talk about reading between the lines, if you look at the basic chart, it's 70, 80, 90% with rep ranges. It doesn't really give you a whole lot, except these are the percentages of optimal, low to high and optimal rep ranges to get the right stimulus, and then the rep ranges for training with a speed of intent, but it doesn't give you any specifics on how to utilize it. I found another article with a formula that came out to kind of prep it like an RPE type of a programmable RPE score. So we're working on that now, and hopefully that'll be launched soon. I will have a free mini course to precede that on volume accumulation training, which is my way of utilizing hypertrophy type methods. So it's a lot of those types of projects. Long term, the tier system strength training cert, which is going to be a project hopefully I get done starting right after this Philippine deal. But yeah, so we're just trying to figure out ways to get information out. My YouTube channel's growing inside the house. It's a variation of things. It just depends on what I want to do that day. Right now, it's got some pretty good stuff on there. This week, I believe we're going to have Duke Manyweather, offensive line specialist. He's coached many of the pro guys, and his combine prep is skyrocketing. And then I've got one more session of my son Peter for our tier system stuff. And then I might even have Jesse and Smelly on there one day.
There we go. All right, Coach. Thank you. All right, Coach. Thank you so much for your time. Yep. Appreciate it. And, make sure if you're listening and watching, check out Coach House. He's quite possibly the best in the business. And we're extremely lucky to be able to chat with him anytime that we're able to do so. So thank you, Coach. And
we'll see you guys.
Talk soon.
Can't wait to get out to California, man. I got to get out.
Can't wait to have you, brother. Can't wait to have you.
We'll see you.
Thank you, Coach.